In 1993, my husband Daniel Carter fell head over heels for a flashy businesswoman named Vanessa Collins. She had the heels, the hair, the attitude, and she knew exactly how to stroke a man's ego. When she walked into our tea factory to learn from our process, I was too busy managing our orders to notice the way she looked at him, or how his eyes followed her like a teenager with a crush. That's when everything began to unravel. In my past life, I handed Daniel my family's ancestral tea recipe like it was nothing, thinking we were building a future together. I gave him the title of factory technician and broke my back in the tea fields, picking leaves from dawn to dusk. My mother-in-law was bedridden, and I changed her diapers between batches, running home and back like a machine. And when I used every penny I had saved to buy out the tea factory and modernize it, bringing our brand back to life, what did he do? He pushed me into a boiling iron pot the day the factory went public. I remember the steam, the bubbling pain, the smell of my own flesh. Cooking it was hell. Vanessa stood there with a twisted smile, saying I should have handed over the recipe sooner. If you hadn't taken it back, I wouldn't have gone bankrupt. I wouldn't have been hit by that truck, she'd said. Men like Daniel deserve worldly women like me. We're soulmates. And then I died screaming. But fate gave me a second chance. When I woke up on the day I handed him the recipe in my previous life, I smiled at him, calmly placed the secret tea formula in his hands, and said he could go discuss business with Vanessa. Inside, my heart was boiling with rage. After he left, I clutched the real patent documents I had prepared and marched straight to the Department of Commerce. I filed for official ownership of the Bennett tea formula. That receipt in my hand was the first weight lifted off my soul since my rebirth. In my previous life, Daniel met Vanessa during one of her so-called research visits to our factory. She was all red nails, tight suits, and expensive perfume. After that, Daniel started slicking his hair back with gel and wearing tailored suits instead of his usual work clothes. He began hinting that I should use my family's secret recipe as an investment in Vanessa's new factory. Big players operate like this, he'd say. You're hoarding a treasure, like some old-world landlord. Sorry, Vanessa has connections. If you don't join her now, she'll find someone else. I refused, and Vanessa's startup flopped. Her debtors chased her down, and she died in a hit-and-run. But once our factory went public, Daniel murdered me and passed it off as an accident. He inherited my hard-earned empire and married a woman who looked just like Vanessa. He used the money I made to live the high life. I clenched that patent receipt tighter. This time, he's the one who's going to pay. When I got home, I hadn't even opened the front door before I heard Vanessa's sugary voice drifting out. I thought she'd hold out longer, but you cracked her in no time. Daniel sounded smug. Claire worships me. If I told her the stars were for sale, she'd find a ladder. Then there was the rustling of clothes. I froze. He continued, but I gotta ask, why dump so much cash into a tea factory? Vanessa chuckled. Hong Kong businessmen took me to a massive operation once. The machines were music to my ears. All I saw was dollar signs. Daniel lowered his voice. Claire's from a small town. Her job is to stay home. Once we steal her clients and toss her some pocket change, she'll back off. Not like she has anywhere else to go. I felt ice in my veins. The blood in my body thickened, frozen by their betrayal. My fingers tightened around the key. Deep breath. I stepped inside with a smile plastered on my face. Xiao Bo, this is version 2, I said, holding up a mock contract. Daniel jumped up to introduce Vanessa. This is Vanessa. She's traveled the world. Our factory's like a lemonade stand to her. Vanessa batted her lashes and laughed. Stop it, you. I smiled politely. So, Vanessa, you've seen the secret recipe, right? Since you're partnering up, we should probably sign a formal agreement. Vanessa smirked, pulling a folded contract from her purse. Daniel already signed. What's his is yours, right? We're all on the same team. Daniel nodded like a bobblehead. I'm going with her to the capital for equipment. We'll be back soon. I hesitated, then pulled out the divorce papers I had prepared. The Department of Commerce is cracking down on fake partnerships. Since we both have stakes in different factories, we could be targeted. Let's do a fake divorce just until we get the bank loan. We'll remarry after. Daniel looked hesitant but glanced at Vanessa and quickly signed. The transfer section was crystal clear. All his shares were now under my name. As soon as we got the divorce certificate, Daniel packed a bag to move out. We've got to make it believable, right? I'll move back soon. That same week, Daniel and Vanessa splurged on state-of-the-art machines. Meanwhile, I restructured the entire Bennett tea factory. As luck would have it, William Hazme, Dad's former apprentice, had just graduated with a tea science degree. He showed up like an angel. In my last life, he tried to help too, but Daniel's fragile ego couldn't take it. He bullied William out of the factory. This time, I welcomed William with open arms. But the calm didn't last long. Inspectors from the Department of Commerce arrived, waving anonymous complaints and demanding to check our warehouse inventory. My heart dropped. I knew the tea quality was solid, but I still felt uneasy. A few days later, the report came in unqualified. Every box sealed, sales frozen. I stood in the warehouse, choking on disbelief. These were premium batches from our new equipment. There was no way they failed. But somehow, word got out fast. Clients who once begged to sign contracts suddenly wanted refunds. They showed up with copies of the failed report, waving legal threats in my face. "You lied to us," one man shouted. "Pay us today, or tomorrow you'll be gone with the money." I couldn't breathe. Compensation letters piled up on my desk like bricks on my chest. William rushed in after hearing the news and tried to calm the angry mob. I had no choice. Hands trembling, I signed the payout forms and handed over every dollar we had on the books. One setup after another, they were breaking me down on purpose. Rumors swirled. "If they seal the place for real, she'll owe tens of thousands," one worker whispered. I heard Mr. Carter's factory is hiring. "Better pay, better future," another said. Alone in my office, I stared at the mess. That's when Daniel and Vanessa strutted in, looking like saints. "Yuehua, we heard about the trouble," Daniel said, voice thick with faux concern. "We came to help." I smiled coldly. "It's just a hiccup. I'll handle it." Daniel's voice grew slick.
Or,
"You could transfer the factory to us. Vanessa knows people. She could turn this around." Vanessa chimed in with a shrug. "You two are divorced now anyway. We need a loan for our new place, and Daniel's worn through his shoes running around. You'd be helping everyone." I stared at them, expression blank. "You wrecked my factory, stole my customers, and now you want it at a discount." Daniel's face twitched. "Yuehua, why would you say that?" I looked past him and spotted William at the door. He smiled gently and waved a lunchbox. "Claire, dinner time. I'm here to make sure you eat." Daniel's jaw clenched. "William? Aren't you still in school?" Vanessa raised an eyebrow, intrigued. William stood tall. "Graduated. I'm now the technical consultant at Bennett Tea." I stood and walked over to him. "Let's go, William." Daniel grabbed my arm. "Claire Bennett, don't forget you're a married woman." I yanked free and sneered. "Daniel Carter, quit the act. We're divorced. Or were you the only one playing pretend?" I glanced at Vanessa. "Though I'm sure your fake act has turned real by now." Daniel's face drained of color. Vanessa didn't even blink. Her eyes were locked on William like he was fresh prey. I realized then that they still saw my factory as theirs to steal. But I wasn't done fighting, not even close. After Daniel and Vanessa strutted out of my office like they hadn't just tried to rob me blind, I sat back in my chair and exhaled slowly, the stress pressing against my ribs like a boulder. But I wasn't going down without a fight. William and I regrouped in the factory's break room and got to work. We planned an all-or-nothing strategy. He contacted a friend who worked at the local newspaper, and we pitched the idea of exposing a corrupt tea factory being targeted with fake reports. We didn't name names, but the hint was strong enough to stir public curiosity. As soon as the article hit print, it caused a firestorm of speculation and support. At the same time, I marched into the Department of Commerce, documents in hand, demanding a formal reinspection. I wasn't going to sit back while they sabotaged my business. Days later, the revised results came back fully qualified, no issues found. My lungs finally expanded properly again. William, always 2 steps ahead, had also been reaching out to his classmates and industry connections, and soon enough, he returned with good news better than I could have imagined. A group of tea merchants from the Southwest had gotten wind of our story and wanted to buy out all our stock. All of it. I watched, almost in disbelief, as trucks loaded up the warehouse inventory that had once seemed doomed to rot. It felt like the universe had shifted, finally nudging things back in my favor. But the real climax came on the day of Vanessa and Daniel's grand opening. Their new tea factory launch had all the bells and whistles, red carpet, media coverage, wealthy investors in tailored suits, and an over-the-top floral arch that spelled out Collins Carter Tea Company in glittery block letters. I received a formal invitation to attend. The nerve. But I wasn't going to let the opportunity go to waste. I dressed sharp, showed up early, and sat quietly in the crowd, watching their smug faces as they greeted guests and soaked in praise. Vanessa stepped onto the stage, wearing a fitted power dress and strutting like she owned the world. "Thank you for joining us as we unveil the future of tea," she said, her voice dripping with confidence. "Our facility uses the latest imported equipment and the most exclusive secret recipe in the industry." That's when I stood up, casually but firmly, and said, "Hold it right there. You don't have the rights to that recipe." The entire room turned to look at me. Vanessa narrowed her eyes like a cat whose tail had just been stepped on. "Claire Bennett, what the hell are you talking about?" Daniel's smug look dropped as he stormed toward me. "Sit down, Claire. Don't cause a scene." William stepped in front of me, calm but protective. "Back off, Mr. Carter." The crowd gasped, cameras clicked, and whispers flooded the hall. I pulled the document out of my purse, unfolded it carefully, and held it up. "This is the patent certificate for the Bennett tea secret recipe. It clearly states that the exclusive rights belong to me, Claire Bennett." Vanessa's face twisted into disbelief. Daniel's turned a sick shade of gray. "We're married," he barked, voice cracking. "That means I have rights to the recipe too." I laughed, loud and clear. "Daniel, did you forget? We're divorced. Officially. Legally." I slammed the divorce certificate down on the table at the front of the stage. The county's marriage office seal was as clear as the stunned expression on Daniel's face. "You said it was just for the bank loan," he shouted. "A fake divorce." "Maybe for you," I replied. "But I filed for real." Vanessa scrambled for her backup plan. "We have a signed contract," she hissed, waving a stack of paper like it meant anything. "It's between you and Daniel," I said coolly. "It has nothing to do with me." Investors and attendees started muttering. Some looked disgusted. Others outright left. "This is a mess," I heard one say. "If they steal recipes, who's to say they won't scam us too?" "How can a man who cheated his own wife be trusted with business?" another whispered. The ceremony disintegrated right then and there. Vanessa stood frozen, rage brewing under her foundation. Daniel's mouth moved, but nothing came out. I packed up my documents, smiled sweetly, and walked out side by side with William. He gave my shoulder a reassuring squeeze, and I nodded. The pleasure of watching them publicly unravel was like a warm sip of fresh tea on a cold morning. But as we stepped outside, I heard Vanessa's shriek behind me. "Don't think you've won, Claire. You're not the only one with a recipe. There are dozens of tea masters lined up, begging for my business." I didn't even flinch. She could scream all she wanted, she was cornered, and she knew it. As I walked away, I heard her turn on Daniel. "You idiot! That fake divorce was your idea. Now the whole factory's useless. I'm burning cash by the day." Daniel shoved her back. "You've been all over the world, but you couldn't tell a trap when you walked into one?" They bickered and accused each other until they both collapsed onto the steps, exhausted and publicly humiliated. Their empire, barely born, was already crumbling. Meanwhile, William and I returned to our factory with momentum behind us and the worst seemingly behind us. Or so I thought. What I didn't know then was that Daniel and Vanessa weren't done. They were about to get desperate, and desperate people make dangerous moves. Their next scheme would involve counterfeit tea, poisonous chemicals, and yet another attempt to destroy everything I'd rebuilt. But I had William. I had my name. And I had no intention of letting them get away with anything this time. Just when I thought things were finally settling down at Bennett Tea, I should have known Daniel and Vanessa wouldn't disappear quietly. When you strip narcissists of their fake glory, they don't go off to reflect, they scramble to claw it back by any means necessary. A few weeks after their factory opening collapsed like a badly folded origami swan, they suddenly resurfaced in the market, riding the hype train again under a new slogan, made with ancient imperial tea craftsmanship. I saw the flyers plastered at the local trade center and immediately smelled something rotten. Vanessa wasn't even a tea drinker last I checked. She was mixing vodka with her protein shakes. I knew they didn't have the recipe, but what they did have was greed and desperation, a dangerous combo. Turns out, they had stumbled across some old man selling what he claimed was an ancient secret formula from a defunct state-owned tea factory. Vanessa was clueless and probably judged the recipe by how dramatic the man's sales pitch was, but Daniel, oh Daniel, had just enough ego and zero actual tea knowledge to pretend he could verify it. He pinched a handful of leaves, sniffed dramatically like some tea sommelier, and said, "This is better than Claire's recipe." Of course he did. The scammer sold it to them for a ridiculous sum, and boom, the machinery in their factory started whirring again. They slapped Imperial Secret Formula on every box, threw a launch party, and watched orders pour in. For a second, I started to worry. The market moves fast, and customers don't always care about authenticity, they chase trends. I was still expanding, still rebuilding, still healing. I couldn't afford another blow. Then Karma stepped in, wearing a lab coat. A customer who drank their tea ended up in the hospital with severe liver damage. Tests were run, warnings were raised, and eventually, the Department of Health traced it all back to Vanessa's tea. I was eating lunch at my desk when I got the call. "Claire, have you heard? They found asphalt in the tea." I choked on my sandwich.
I'm sorry, Fat.
Asphalt, my supplier repeated, clearly disturbed. Their ancient recipe is poison. My fingers shook as I hung up. I wasn't surprised, but I was still stunned. Asphalt? How low can you go? Not long after, I received another call, this time from the Department of Commerce. They were inviting Mule, summoning me Riolito a formal review, because Vanessa had named me in her complaint. Apparently, she told the police I'd sabotaged her, planted fake ingredients, and bribed government officials. I nearly laughed myself off my chair.
She was spiraling.
At the official hearing, I walked in calm and collected, documents in hand. Vanessa and Daniel sat across from me, looking like drowned rats. Vanessa wore a dress 3 sizes too tight and makeup that couldn't hide the panic under her eyes. Daniel looked like he hadn't slept in a week. The lead investigator pulled out the tea sample and dropped the bomb. Their product was confirmed to contain asphalt. Vanessa immediately pointed at Daniel. He bought the recipe. I just handled branding. Daniel's face turned red. She's the majority shareholder. I only own 30%. They turned on each other so fast, I almost got whiplash. But it didn't matter, the evidence was airtight. Their factory was shut down, their accounts frozen, and all products recalled. Vanessa screamed in court like a banshee. "Why are you punishing me? They should have read the label. Claire paid you off, didn't she? That which bribed you." She lunged forward, but the bailiff pulled her back. Her wrists were handcuffed, her career finished. Daniel, lucky snake, escaped jail time because of his minor shareholding, but he had to sell everything he owned to pay off the fines, house, car, bank accounts, all liquidated. For a brief moment, I thought that was the end.
But no.
After the scandal exploded, their factory equipment went up for public auction. You bet I showed up. I didn't even try to hide my satisfaction as I outbid everyone and bought the entire operation at half its value. Their gleaming machines now belonged to me. The next evening, as I walked home, I had this weird feeling. You know that instinct, that primal chill crawling up your spine that tells you you're not alone? I stopped, turned sharply, and sure enough a figure ducked into the shadows. I waited until we reached a narrow corner and spun around. Daniel, what the hell do you think you're doing following me? He stepped into the light, looking like a ghost of his former self. Gone were the suits, the cologne, the smug grin. Now he wore greasy work clothes and desperation. Claire, I just wanted to see you. I've been thinking a lot. About us. I laughed so bitterly it hurt. We don't have a US, Daniel. You tried to murder me in another life. You betrayed me in this one. And now you want what closure? He took a step forward, eyes glassy. I know I messed up. But you loved me once. You'd do anything for me. We can get that back. Let's remarry. I'll work in the tea garden with you. I'll support you. I stared at him, absolutely disgusted. So, this is your big redemption arc? Come crawling back with empty pockets and expect me to welcome you? You think I've been waiting around for your apology like some tragic ex-wife trope. But before I could finish my rant, he lunged forward and hugged me like some deranged rom-com lead. Claire, please. Just forget everything that happened. Let's pretend none of it ever existed. I struggled against him, shouting, pushing, kicking, but he held on like a leech. His breath was hot on my neck, and I felt sick. That's when William appeared. Out of nowhere, like a guardian angel in a flannel shirt, he swung a brick straight into Daniel's head. Daniel dropped like a sack of trash. William pulled me into his arms, frantically checking me. Claire, are you okay? Are you hurt? Did he? I'm fine, I whispered, my voice shaking. I clung to him without thinking. His arms felt warm and safe, and for the first time in days, I could breathe. Police arrived quickly after a bystander called them. Daniel was hauled away, whining about how I was his ex-wife, and he was just trying to reconnect. I filed a formal complaint, but since there was no real injury or weapon found on him, they could only let him off with a warning. After that, he dropped the mask. His true face came roaring back. You think you've won, Claire? He shouted across the police parking lot. Found yourself a new man, huh? Think you're above me now? Don't forget who gave you everything. I didn't even blink. You gave me nothing. I rebuilt my life in spite of you. And I meant every word. That night, after we returned home, I sat with William and finally let my walls crack. I told him everything, the trauma, the fear, the dreams of being drowned, the helplessness of the past life I'd once lived, and the second chance I'd been gifted. He didn't laugh or question it. He just sat there, held my hand, and said, "You never have to go through anything alone again." I think that's when I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was healing. I was living. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. After Daniel got dragged away by the cops like some pathetic soap opera villain, I genuinely thought that might be the final chapter. Maybe I was naive, but there was a part of me that believed he'd disappear quietly after getting humiliated in front of half the town and nearly concussed by a brick to the skull. But of course not. Men like Daniel don't bow out gracefully, they wait, fester, and plot. And sure enough, just when the Bennett tea factory was starting to stabilize, rumors started floating around town like a bad stench that wouldn't go away. Some were saying my supply chain was shaky. Others claimed my customers were jumping ship. I knew where it was coming from, and I had a good guess why. That's when my supplier, Robert Hill, gave me a call. Claire, he said, clearing his throat awkwardly, I gotta be honest. Daniel and Vanessa offered me a deal I couldn't refuse. They're paying an extra $1 per pound and prepaying for 6 months. I clutched the phone tighter. Robert, you and I have been working together for years. I've always paid on time. I've never undercut you. I know, he said, sounding genuinely regretful. But they've got friends in the Department of Commerce. If I keep working with you, I might get flagged for inspections every week. I've got a business to run too, Claire. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But instead, I just whispered, "Got it," and hung up. I sat at my desk staring at my hands, trying to will them to stop shaking. William walked in just as the panic started creeping into my chest. What happened? He asked, voice sharp. I told him. All of it. He didn't flinch. Then we stop relying on people like Robert. We buy our own tea garden. My head snapped up. What? We raise the seedlings, grow the tea, process it, package it. Control every step. No more middlemen. No more blackmail. No more sabotage. I blinked at him for a long moment, then burst out laughing not because it was funny, but because it was the most insane, brilliant thing anyone had ever said to me. You're serious? I asked. Completely, he said. Let's do it. The very next day, we hit the road and started scouting tea gardens. We toured nearly a dozen places, some tiny and overgrown, others massive but mismanaged. Then we found it. A hillside tea garden with a perfect elevation, soil quality, and enough space to expand. I knew at the moment I saw it this was our future. We worked with the bank to get the loan approved, and when the property certificate was finally stamped with my name, I felt like I could finally breathe again. No one was ever going to strangle my business at the source again. And just when I thought the universe might finally be letting me catch a break, I ran into Daniel and Vanessa Ogden of Corseat, a regional business exchange event. The moment Vanessa spotted me, she strutted over like a reality show villain, heels clicking and perfume choking the air around her. Well, if it isn't Director Bennett, she sneered. Heard your supplier bailed and your workers went on strike. You must be hanging on by a thread. I smiled without showing my teeth. And yet I'm still here, while you're out here peddling poison tea like it's a side hustle. Daniel sauntered over, flicking imaginary ash from his hand like he was some big-shot CEO. We're just helping you realize your limits, Claire. Business isn't for everyone. Vanessa fake laughed and flipped her hair. Let's face it. The only reason you had a moment of glory was because you had Daniel by your side. Some women just aren't built to lead. I clenched my fists so tightly my nails dug into my palm. Then I stepped in closer and dropped my voice. You really want to go there? Let's talk about who can't lead. I may not have children, but at least I didn't chase after someone else's husband like a second-rate gold digger. Vanessa's face drained of color. Daniel looked smug until I went in for the kill. And speaking of kids, I said sweetly, when you were diagnosed with azoospermia and begged me to take the blame for your infertility, I did it without hesitation. But now you want to stand here and pretend you're God's gift to women. The silence that followed was beautiful. Vanessa looked at him like he had suddenly turned into a wet sock. Then, right on cue, William walked in, holding a red folder. Claire, he said, the paperwork's finalized. The tea garden is officially yours. The workers have started harvesting. I took the folder from his hand, opened it with dramatic flair, and showed it to Daniel and Vanessa. Still think I can't lead? I asked. This is what leadership looks like, building something with your own hands, not stealing it from someone else. Daniel looked like he was trying to hold back a scream. Vanessa just stood there, blinking, foundation cracking under the weight of her own shame. Before either of them could say another word, the doors to the banquet hall flew open. Several officers from the Department of Health entered, badges visible. Vanessa Collins, the lead officer called out. She raised her hand instinctively. You're under investigation. A consumer reported severe liver damage after consuming your tea. Lab results show the presence of industrial asphalt. Her jaw dropped. That's not possible. Our tea is made from an ancient recipe. We've already tested the batch, the officer replied, holding up the sample bag. You're coming with us. Vanessa tried to argue, but two officers flanked her and started escorting her out. In a last-ditch effort, she screamed, He's a shareholder. Daniel was there when I bought the recipe. He should be arrested too. Daniel blanched. I only own 30%. It's her company. The officers didn't care. They hauled both of them out. The guests stared in stunned silence. Some whispered. Others shook their heads. I stood there, watching it all unfold like it was a movie I'd seen before. And maybe I had, except this time, I wasn't the one being destroyed. I was the one doing the rebuilding. And I wasn't done yet. After Vanessa and Daniel were dragged out of that banquet like a pair of felons straight off a Netflix true crime doc, I thought that was finally it. I could sip my tea in peace, focus on my new tea garden, and build something real with William by my side. The Bennett tea brand was slowly becoming a name people actually respected, not just locally, but beyond our province. William's new roasting technique gave our tea a subtle floral kick, and when we debuted it at the regional expo, even the snobbiest buyers did a double take. Everything felt like it was finally coming together, like I'd made it through the storm. But of course, Daniel wasn't finished. That man had more comebacks than a B-list pop star. At first, I didn't even know he was back. He disappeared after the investigation, vanished from local gossip, and didn't show up in any of the industry circles. It wasn't until I did a random inspection of the tea garden one morning unplanned, totally off schedule at that, I saw him again. At first, I didn't recognize him. He had shaved his head, darkened his skin with dirt and sun, and wore a beat-up uniform with someone else's name tag. But that hunched posture, that fake humility, it was him. Daniel Carter. Working under a false identity. At my tea garden. My gut dropped. I didn't confront him right away. Instead, I called the supervisor over and told him to keep an eye on the new guy and to notify me of any suspicious behavior. Something didn't feel right. I didn't want to assume the worst, but with Daniel, assuming the worst was usually still underestimating him. A few days later, the supervisor burst into my office, face pale, voice tight. "Miss Bennett, you need to come to the South Field. It's urgent." I followed him without question, heart pounding against my ribs. And there he was. Daniel, crouched behind the second row of bushes, fumbling with a spray tank. I watched from a distance as he unscrewed the nozzle and poured a thick, greenish liquid into the tank. "What is that?" I whispered. The supervisor handed me a crumpled purchase receipt with Daniel's fake name. My stomach turned. It was a highly toxic pesticide that had been banned from agricultural use for years. "Call the team," I ordered. "Do not let him leave this field." Within seconds, our crew surrounded him. He jumped up, startled, and immediately tried to act innocent. "What's going on?" "I'm just spraying for bugs." "With illegal chemicals?" I snapped, stepping out from the shadows. "Really, Daniel?" He froze. "Claire too didn't. Don't bother lying," I said coldly. "We have the receipt. We have the tampered equipment. We even have surveillance footage." He tried to run, but two staffers grabbed him and pinned him to the ground. William arrived just in time to see the whole pathetic scene. "You really thought you'd get away with poisoning our crops?" he asked, disbelief etched across his face. "I wasn't trying to poison anyone," Daniel whimpered. I wanted to cause a little trouble."
Nothing permanent.
"You pour nerve agents onto our tea fields and think it's nothing?" I hissed. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but fury. All those years I bent over backward for this man, only for him to become a vengeful criminal who kept crawling back like mold. When the police arrived, I watched as they hauled him away again. But this time, I wasn't just some angry ex-wife reporting harassment. I had evidence. Photos. Receipts. Witnesses. He was charged with attempted agricultural poisoning. There was no escaping this one.
No loophole.
No sweetheart deals. He was finished. When it was over, when they dragged him away in cuffs, crying and yelling about how I used to love him, how he just wanted to start over, I didn't feel pity. I felt clean. And when William wrapped his arms around me and whispered, "It's over now," something inside me finally let go. The fear. The tension. The trauma of 2 lives' worth of betrayal. It was like my soul exhaled. We pressed forward. After Daniel's arrest made headlines, people started taking our brand even more seriously. The story of the Phoenix Tea Garden, a woman reborn from betrayal, poison, and fire spread like wildfire. Buyers from overseas reached out, curious to taste the tea that had survived sabotage and become legend. And then, just when I thought life couldn't surprise me anymore, I found out I was pregnant. At first, I didn't believe it. After years of being blamed for infertility, I never even let myself hope. But the test was clear. The doctor confirmed it. And when I told William, he just hugged me so tightly I thought I might break. We cried. We laughed. He kissed my stomach and whispered, "Our little tea leaf." Months passed like a dream. I gave birth to a healthy baby girl with William's eyes and my stubborn chin. We named her Lily. She smelled like sunshine and steamed jasmine. The moment I held her, I knew I'd finally closed the book on my past. There were no more ghosts. No more what-ifs. No more Daniel Carter-shaped wounds bleeding in my chest. My tea factory was thriving. My family was whole. And Claire Bennett was finally free. But even then, I kept the photo of the old boiling iron pot tucked away in a drawer, not as a scar, but as a reminder. That pain, that betrayal, that death, it was real.
It happened.
And it made me who I am. Because sometimes, the only way to bloom is to be burned first. They say revenge is best served cold, but I disagree. It's best brewed slowly, steeped in patience, and poured out with precision. And after everything Daniel put me through, the betrayal, the sabotage, the literal attempted poisoning of my tea garden, I didn't just want him to pay. I wanted the universe to make it permanent. And this time, it did, because after his conviction for agricultural poisoning, the court came down hard, sentencing him to prison with no parole, no second chances, no fake apologies that would ever find my ears again. And when I saw his hollow face through the courtroom glass as they read the verdict, I didn't feel pity. I felt justice, the kind of justice that doesn't erase the scars but gives them meaning. And in that moment, standing beside William with Lily resting peacefully in his arms, I knew this was my real ending, not the boiling pot, not the betrayal, but the courtroom, the baby, the man who stood with me when everything crumbled, because Daniel's downfall wasn't the victory. It was just the final crack in a wall that was never built to last. And with him gone for good, I could finally expand, dream, plan. So William and I invested in the latest sustainable tea processing tech, revamped our international shipping, and turned Bennett Tea into a brand people didn't just buy, they believed in. Our story, the woman who rose from betrayal and death to build an empire, became the kind of legend reporters couldn't stop writing about. And honestly, part of me felt weird seeing my name in glossy print, like some character in a movie I hadn't agreed to star in. But the truth is, I earned every headline, every feature, every quiet nod of respect from buyers who once ghosted me after the smear campaign. Because when you've crawled through fire and come out the other side holding your own name like a sword, you stop apologizing for being seen. And people stop looking at you like you're fragile. They look at you like you're steel. And as Lily grew up surrounded by tea leaves and sunlight, I told her everything, not the sugar-coated fairy tale, but the truth, that her mom was once someone who loved the wrong man, gave too much and burned for it, but also someone who chose to rise, to fight, to heal. And she'd blink up at me with her big brown eyes and say, "Mommy, was Daddy the one who saved you?" And I'd kiss her forehead and whisper, "No, sweetie, I saved myself." Because William, as amazing as he is, never tried to rescue me. He just stood beside me while I took back my life. And that's the difference. That's real love, the kind that doesn't expect you to shrink or forget, but one that fits beside your fire. And together we traveled, opening partnerships with tea houses abroad, blending culture and craftsmanship, bringing Bennett Tea to shelves in places I'd only dreamed about while kneeling in a boiling kitchen years ago. And every spring, we'd return to the garden for the first harvest, me with my clipboard, William with his formulas, Lily running through the rows like it was a fairy forest, and I'd inhale the scent of fresh leaves, warm soil, and peace. Real peace, not silence, but the kind that hums with the rhythm of a life rebuilt from ashes. And there were still moments when the past tried to creep back, like the occasional anonymous email warning me Daniel might get out early, or whispers that Vanessa was writing a memoir from her prison cell claiming she'd been framed. But none of it stuck, because people had seen the truth. They'd seen her fall, his crimes, my rise, and nothing she scribbled between bars would change the fact that while she faked her way through power, I earned mine leaf by leaf. And if I've learned anything from 2 lifetimes of pain and growth, it's this: you don't need anyone's permission to start over. You don't need to be perfect to deserve peace. And when people try to reduce your worth to what you've lost, it's your turn to remind them of everything you've built, because Surviving isn't the end goal, thriving is, and I don't need a medal or a monument or anyone's pity. I have my name on the patent, my hands in the soil, my child in my arms, and a man beside me who knew how to love without owning. And that's more than I ever dare hope for in that first life when I was just the quiet wife with the recipe and the broken heart. Because now I'm Claire Bennett, founder, mother, survivor. And nothing, and I mean nothing, tastes sweeter than that first cup of tea on a spring morning when you know the only person who controls your future now is you.